So the candies here it's in italics, as you can see. So the first letter of the genus is capitalized, while the specific epithet is always in lower letters. And the second part of the is called specific epithet, which is unique for each species within the genus. So the species is found within the genus, and both genus and specific epithet are always underlined, like I said, or in italics. In order for the biologists to avoid ambiguity, like confusion, and when communicating about their research, Latin names have to be used, or scientific name in particular. So if I did a study about goats, I've got colleagues who are doing studies about goats. So like you find in the lab, like more than 4 people are doing a research about goats. Some they're doing genetics about the disease that the goats are due. Some are working with the veterinary scientist about what. So some are checking about the reproduction and the color. Some have the color, different colors. They're checking why other goats are white and other are black, other are brown, and all those stuff. They're checking. A lot of people are doing different. So imagine all these people when they're coming to present, because there are some presentations. I'm sure you might have done that in high school or somewhere, but where you're gonna have to present your work, what you're doing, like what I'm doing right now. But instead, I'm gonna be presenting what is it that I'm doing as a researcher, or maybe you're doing honors, or you're doing MSc, or you're doing your doctorate. So if there are 2 or more or 3 or more people who are studying about the same subject, like goat, so imagine if those people are just saying, what I found in the goat is that 1, 2, 3. What I found in the goat is that not so forth. What I found in the goats of Free State. What I found in the goats of Bloemfontein. What I found in the goats of Limpopo. What I found in the. There's gonna be ambiguity and confusion, and so you need to use scientific terms or Latin names so that everybody could know the specific item you are referring to, or the specific study that you are talking about, or the specific species that you are talking about. So, for example, Panthera padaris and Homo sapiens are the scientific names. Panthera is the scientific name of leopard, and the Homo sapiens is the one for us human being, respectively. So here I just made an example of you know what, when I was preparing my notes, I forgot to do something. I wanted to hide these names and first do an exercise with you. So this is a banana tree, and this is a marula tree. This is a jacaranda tree. So jacaranda tree is the common name that usually used, but its scientific name is Jacaranda momisofolia. This is the common scientific name for the banana tree. We know the banana tree, and then this is its common name. So usually there's what we call common name, how the species is commonly known as. These are the common names for plants. Or what is common, like let's say a dog, let's say a donkey, a horse. I know a colleague who is studying about a horse, a goat. People who are studying about goats and all that. A lot of people are studying about fishes in aquatic biologies. Like, there are people who are doing a lot of aquatic insects, which you know what they are commonly so, but you need to describe them in a scientific form. You need to use their names scientifically. You need to find the scientific names that you can be able to use them, and therefore you're gonna have to name them. So therefore, this is a jacaranda tree. This is a Sclerocarya berea, which is marula tree that most of you, I know that this fruit they do a marula juice. With, culturally, there's a marula beer that we the old women in the villages make, which is called marula beer. I don't know if most of you know about it. Then it's derived from this tree, and this one right here is a avocado tree, which is commonly known as avocado tree. And I just make the list of trees that are common that we can both know, but it's called Paracea americana. And this one right here is Lantana camara. And also, the other thing is that you will find that there are other tree species. I'm making an example with tree species, which are, I see there's a comment. Is it a question? There are other trees which are, no, no. There are other trees which have names or species names which are like this Americana. There are other trees which are not indigenous to our country or to that environment, which are just not from here. But they how did they come here? We will talk about it later at a later on stage, which are not from here. There are other trees which are categorized as invasive species. The invasive species is that that species, it came as the word itself, it came and inhibit an area which is not indigenous, and the invasive species, they are threats to indigenous species that you will find that as at a later stage, like what we talk about in the natural selection before, that this species or this plant tree, if it was not originally there, if for some reason it occupied or it inhibit that area, before you know it, it will outcompete all the species in that place. So you'll find people who are doing studies that are just looking at invasive species or invasive plants or invasive medicinal, those who are doing ethnobotany and all of that. So there will be identify species which are invasive. They can be able to come there and identify that species and be able to describe that this species is not from there. And you find that the species which is indigenous to that community or to that area is being outcompeted by that invasive species. And one of the causes of that is what is commonly known as disturbance. In when you're going to the third year or second year, I'm sure there will be a course or there will be a chapter called disturbance. Plant disturbance. Plant disturbance is when, if let's say there was we had a vegetation, for the lack of a better word, let's just say a bush, so that you can understand quickly. There was an environment where there was nothing, and then that environment is spotted perhaps for or rather many people, they, there's those junctions or cross section where people just throw rubbish near the communities, where people, because maybe the municipality don't come and collect the dustbins and everything, they just spot a location where they will just throw bins everywhere. And because there was a bush, you find that there's a spot where everyone just come and dispose their dustbins from them. And then the municipality at a later stage, they come with a tractor and they clear that area, and they write a sign there saying no dumping site. If you dump things here, you're going to be prosecuted. So when plants have to regenerate or rejuvenate them, that's a gap where invasive species will emerge. That's one of the major causes where invasive species will occupy an area when there was a disturbance, or if somebody was building or infrastructure, you have to clear a bush, or you have to clear a wilderness place where you're gonna have to put on a structure, and then when there's that gap, that's when disturbance happen. How can you? That's when disturbance happen, and that's when invasive plants will be able to get a gap to form. How do you have to make sure that indigenous plants remain, or they survive, or you have to be able to, in your vegetation, you have to do, there are a lot of things. One of the things that maybe you need to somebody can ask you is fire. People often say fire. What is fire important in the environment? So somebody might look at you when you are burning a place during August. Is it August? Yeah, during those season, and they're like, "What did these plants do for you?" So those plants, when you're doing a fire, fire helps so that the plants which are there, they rejuvenate very quickly, and they have more strength to recover, and then it helps that at least the this less threat of invasive species to break up and break out and be able to emerge and be able to to occupy the space where indigenous species inhibit. Obviously, some of the invasive species or invasive plant species are beneficial, others are not beneficial. Like obviously, I'm sure most of you would like avocados by the show of thumbs. So some of us won't mind. Yeah, avocado is an invasive species. But there are other, in most of the invasive species, that are threat to the habitat because they consume a lot of water. They change the dimension or the landscape of the vegetation. You find that the original or the indigenous species which were in that environment, it was level with the floodplain, or it was level with the vegetation, but you find your if you wonder why when the rain comes, the velocity or the speed of erosion is increased all of a sudden after 5 years. Is because all the indigenous species, tree species, have been removed. Now the invasive species cannot contain the amount the rainfall it's when it's flowing in that environment. So those are the kind of disadvantages that invasive species have on the environment or in the habitat, but we are still going to go through all of those. So never mind this, these are just everything that we were just talking about. The plant species example, also the dogs is Canis lapus. If you can see here, what did we talk about? Do you see the here, this one is the Canis, also the genus is Canis, but you can find, we see here that the genus of a dog is also Canis lapus, but the Canis is also there. But we talk that the genus is more or less like a surname. The lizard is formed from the species of Lacertelia and those. So hierarchical cation, okay, in addition, hierarchical system is, so this Linnaeus is who also, let me log out here, also showed the sorry. Linnaeus also showed the group, also grouped the living organism into hierarchy of studies, where you have to increasingly inclusive categories. So Linnaeus classification is called taxonomic hierarchy, which includes a nested series of formal categories. Remember, I told you that this is gonna be a list of notes. Please don't sleep and ask if you've got any question. I know it sounds like something which have to be studied a lot, and also at the end we will also share the PDFs notes which are there. So to this formal categories, which includes domain, kingdom, phylum, order, family, genus, and lastly, subspecies. I know lastly we were talking about we ended only on genus and species only, but there are some times where in certain exemptions of different species where you will also have to include a subspecies. To some extent, you're going to have to, the other word, there's subphylum, which is rare. There are suborder, but sometimes the subfamily. But the hierarchy is that, the taxonomic hierarchy is that you will have to talk about domain, you have to talk about kingdom, where in terms of kingdom, you have to be, there are how many kingdoms? There are kingdom Plantae, kingdom Animalia, kingdom Fungi. There's also when you have to talk about phyla, then there has to be a classification, there has to be an order, there have to be a family, there have to be a genus, and there have to be a species. So they might ask you, using a taxonomic hierarchy, describe the taxonomic hierarchy of Sclerocaria birrea. Or they just give you a common name of a dog. You need to tell us which domain does dog come from, which kingdom does dog come from, which phylum does dog come from, which classification is the dog coming from, which order is the dog coming from, which family does the dog belongs to, which genus does this dog belongs to, and what is its species, and what is this scientific name at all. And they said 8 marks or 12 marks to do that. So to put this to our daily lives and understanding, the resulting of the biological classification for particular organism is more like a postal address. I like how your lecturer put it. Postal address identifying a person in a particular apartment or in a certain building with in many apartments or on a street or with many apartments building in a city, or that city has many streets and so on and so on. So you just locating is just an identification of where can I find this species. So where does this species belong to? And you will also have to note that the organism include within the within any category of taxonomic hierarchy composed of a taxon. And in a plural form is it's called a taxa, and in a singular form it's called a taxon, or in a plural is taxa, and in a singular form it's rather taxon. Leopard, for example, we mentioned in the previous slides, it's its taxon is Felidae at the family level, and Panthera it's a taxon at a genus level. And you're gonna have to also, you will see on the notes where we send you in figure 22, where it shows the pantheon, the Panthera, or the taxon of a genus level, and all of those. The species that are included in the same taxon at the bottom of the hierarchy are generally share many characteristics. So by that they mean that there are characteristics which are similar, obviously have to be more closely to the species that are included in the same taxon at the bottom of the hierarchy. So the difference here could be, by contrast, be that species that are included in the same taxon only near to the top of hierarchy generally share fewer traits, because if the species that are included in the same taxon at the bottom of hierarchy, or at the bottom, species that included in the same taxon at the bottom of the hierarchy share many characteristics, but species that are included in the same taxon at the top, this is the difference, they generally share fewer traits or fewer characteristics. So that's the distinction, or the contrast there. And very important is that the Linnean system, taxa broader than the taxa is much broader than the genus that are not italicized, or that are not capitalized, in order for you to notice all of those. So in the construction of phylogeny trees, so pattern which are shared among a characteristic can be depicted in a diagram called a cladogram. A cladogram. So we'll also have to look at what is a cladogram there in order for you to receive some output or sense of what your examiner is gonna look for when they give you exercises or tests or assignments. So if a shared characteristics are homologous, then don't worry about some of these characteristics. They are there in your notes at the bottom. You will find them. So if by don't worry, I mean if this is the first time they are popping out. So don't panic and be like, oh, what is this? Oh, I'm gonna stop until the no. So if the shared characteristics are homologous and it's explained that by common ancestry, then the cladogram forms the basis of phylogenetic tree. So in order for the cladogram to form the basis of phylogenetic tree, it means that the shared characteristics have to be homologous and they have to be explained that by the formation of common ancestors. So a clade, agree we talk about cladogram. A cladogram, then a clade is defined as a group of species that includes an ancestral species and all its descendants. So what is a clade? A clade is a group of species that includes that ancestral species and all of it, that one where we are the descendant. Where are we coming from? We are coming from that one ancestor. We're coming from there. When we describe that, we are describing a clade and all that. So the study of resemblance among the clade is called cladicistics. So cladicistics is when we say, oh, there's a resemblance among those clades, among not among the species. That's the detail. That's the trick that your lecturer might be like. If he said the resemblance among the species, it's a whole different thing now because the species are within the clades. But if we're talking about the cladicistics, we're talking about the resemblance of the clades. The clades of the what is a clade is the defined as the group of all those group of species that includes an ancestral species and all its descendants. So each branch or a clade. So you can also sometimes use the term branch, but in order to be specific and in order for you to not to lose track, just use clade. I would prefer you to use clade when you're making your notes. Each clade can be nested within a larger clade. A valid clade is monophyletic, consisting of an ancestral species and all its descendants. We're also gonna define in the next few slides what is monophyletic. What is monophyletic? There's the opposite of monophyletic, but don't worry about that. But a valid clade is monophyletic when what? When consisting of an ancestral species and all its descendants. That's when it's valid for monophyletic. When we lack information about some members of a clade, the result is called paraphyletic grouping that consists of some but not all of the descendants. So the valid clade or the differentiation here will be the monophyletic and paraphyletic. So paraphyletic here will be two. Paraphyletic is when there's some information which are missing, or when we lack information about some members of the clade, and the result is that grouping is paraphyletic, where it consists rather of some species, rather of some species, but not all the descendants which are there. But the one which is valid, one which is validated is monophyletic, which consists of all ancestral species and all its descendants. So they might require you to please differentiate between the monophyletic and paraphyletic, and you're gonna have to outline such description. As those situations call for further reconstruction, there's something which call reconstruction. So you're gonna be making one in future, somewhere in years to come, 3 years to come, whenever you are now interested to go for studies like this, when you are genetically constructing a phylogenetic tree, there will be times where you might be creating your own phylogenetic tree. And if some species, because usually when you are doing it yourself, people who are doing research, they always come across this. In an ideal research which you made yourself, you will come across paraphyletic groupings. When you create your phylogenetic group, and you will come across that you've got information which are missing some members. You cannot see some members of certain species which are missing. So you're gonna have polyphyletics groups. No, rather paraphyletic groupings, where other members of the descents are missing. So in such situation, you will have to do what you call reconstruction to uncover certain species that ties these groupings together into monophyletic clades. So that's when I'm sure you might have some relatives who are doing research or who are studying, who are saying, hey, I'm not done with lab work. Hey, my results are not are not coming together. So they might finding that they're trying to create a phylogenetic tree, but when they're doing phylogenetic tree, there are some things which are still missing. So they have to do what we call further reconstruction, and they have to maneuver it until such ties groupings together into monophyletic clades. For determining which similarities between species are relevant into grouping species is in a clade is quite a challenge. Like I said, it is especially important to distinguish, therefore, similarities that are based on shared ancestry, or homology from those which are based on convergent evolution or analogy. We talk about homologous, but here you're going to have to look for the ones which are based on convergent evolution or analogy when you are constructing this phylogenetic tree, in order for you to construct this phylogenetic tree. So systematics must also sort through homologous features. Anybody with a question up to so far? Just show by the by raising of hand if you've got question. Okay, let me move on. Then systematics must also sort through homologous features or characters to separate shared derived characteristic from a shared primitive character. So what we're talking about here, what's the big, you must say, why are you telling us all this? Sounds like you are depositing all this information. Is this a hierarchy of classifying where the species come from? How you classify individual species, where they come from, and how they branch, or how these clades come about to arrive to where they are right now at the present moment of the specific study, or which is in focus. So systematics must also sort through these homologous features And a character refers to any feature to that particular taxon that possesses it. So you're gonna have to pay attention to wording here, also to because when we talk about characteristics, also this word character, it can also be used as a trait, or as a feature, or as a feature in which any feature of that particular taxon possesses you. So you can say the character that the gene that is featured on the genome, or the characteristics which are found in that particular trait that has to be derived into that particular taxon which it possesses. So a shared derived character is unique to a particular clade, and a shared primitive character is found not only in the clade being analyzed, but also in older clades. Why? We said this, I think we said this earlier on today when we were talking about how Darwin explained natural selection, that some characters, but I think on the previous session we used traits, that traits which are some traits will be passed on to the new descendants. So you might find that there are some traits which are not necessarily on all the descendants which are here, but you can find them, or you can find shared, that those shared primitive character, you might find that they are not only found in the clade that is only being analyzed at that particular moment, but you can find it in older or in the previous clades that has the. For example, the presence of a hair is a good character to distinguish the clades of a mammals from other tetrapods. That the presence of fur, you can say hair or you can say fur, which is present, is also a good character to distinguish the clade of mammals from other tetrapods. It is shared derived character that uniquely identifies mammals. Most of the fur mammals have fur. Even birds. Birds have fur. Birds have fur. Did you know that birds are mammals? You can Google that. Birds are mammals, which I found interesting that many people. Okay, I'm not gonna lie to you. Even when I started to focus on birds, I was so like, oh, okay, birds, not bird, but birds, the one that because the mammal, they feed their offsprings. They care their offsprings for particular while before they can just let them just go. So that characteristics is a it's a unique, it's very unique that identify mammals, but also the presence of a backbone can qualify as a shared derived character or characteristics, but at a deeper branch point that distinguish all vertebrates than other from other mammals. So you might find here what they just saying, your lecturer is just saying, is just that you might have to be careful into, excuse me, you might have to be careful to excuse me, you might have to be careful in using characteristics as distinguishing characteristics, such as the backbone, which can qualify, yes, as a shared derived character, but because at a deeper level or at a deeper branch point where there's a branching, that discipline that distinguishes all of them, all the vertebrates from other from other mammals. So we're still gonna go to the clades of what are vertebrates, what are mammals, what are primates, what are what is the other groupings. Yeah, but we're still gonna do them also in the in the next. I saw them in your notes in the near future. So among vertebrates, the backbone is shared primitive character because it evolves in common ancestor to all vertebrates. Then a shared derived character are useful in establishing a phylogeny. As they are useful in terms of establishing that phylogeny, but a shared primitive characters are not. So shared derived characters are useful in establishing a phylogeny, but shared primitive characters that are we talked about primitive characters there. Shared primitive characters compared to shared derived characters. The shared derived characters are the ones that are very useful in establishing a phylogeny, but a shared primitive characters are not are not cannot help you a lot in terms of establishing a phylogeny. So the status of a character shared derived versus the shared primitive. So it's a character shared derived versus shared primitive. Shared primitive versus shared derived. Shared derived versus shared primitive. They may ask you to differentiate between shared characters, shared derived character or shared primitive character, but they depend, it may depend on the level at which the analysis is being performed. It depends on which level do you want to go. It depends on which deeper clade or branch you want to reach, if I may put it like that. So a key step into in cladistic, what did we say cladistic was? Cladistic is the study of the resemblance among all the clades, among all the study of resemblance of among the clades is called cladistics. So the key in cladistics or the study of the resemblance of all the clades analysis is it relies or it lies on the outgroup comparison, which don't be disappointed by the depth of these notes. It's just that you just have to unpack them and create a better notes for yourself. But what they're saying is pretty much the same. If I just have to ease your confusion, if there's any confusion, because the key step in cladistic analysis is the outgroup comparison, which is practically what they said there, that if you want to check what is cladistics, the comparison of the clades of all the which includes all the species that share the common ancestry. So the comparison is the key step in this cladistic analysis is outgroup comparison, which is used to differentiate shared primitive characters from shared derived one, which is used from shared primitive compare characteristic from the shared derived. It's just the level of differentiating between the shared primitive and shared derived. So to do this, you will need to identify and outgroup a species or a group of species that is closely related to species that you are studying but known to be less closely related to than many other species or group to each other group. And I must say that all of this will make sense when you are doing the exercise and examples of these diagrams. And in your notes, you will also have to look out also for the diagrams where they will be showing this cladograms or structures. So to study relationship among in group, for example, of five vertebrates, maybe a leopard, a turtle, a salamander, a tuna, or a lamp, you need to go Google what are these. What are these? I'm sure most of you know a leopard. Anyone who knows a turtle? Turtle? A salamander? I didn't put up the pictures. Yeah. I like putting pictures. So on a cladogram, an animal is called the lancelet would be a good choice because this lesson is small member of the phylum Chordata. Those vertebrates which they lack the backbone, the species which are making the in group to display a mixture of shared primitive that are derived from shared derived. And here in all of this, what you're gonna need to do in order to classify or characterize, the only thing that you're gonna need to do only is to differentiate between the shared primitive and shared derived. Those are the characters that you might have to worry yourself about. If you just can be able to outline that, you are pretty much sorted. I can guarantee you that. Then in an outgoing group, that was the ingoing group, the assumption that any homologous shared by the group and the outgroup are primitive characters that were present in the common ancestors of both group. So homologous or homologous presence in some or in all the in-group. Note the in-group, not the out-group. The in-group is therefore are assumed to have evolved after a divergence of the in-group and the out-group taxa. So in our example that your lecturer will make here is that a notochord present in all the lancelets and in the embryos of the in-group is a shared primitive character that's not useful for sorting out the relationship between the members of the in-group because the presence of the vertebral column is shared by all members of the in-group, but the out-group is useful for the whole in-group if you can follow that progression. So the presence in the lancelet and in the members of the in-group is a shared primitive character, and it's not useful for sorting out the relationship between the members of the group, but the presence of the vertebral column shared by all members of the in-group, but not the out-group, is useful character for the whole in-group. And the presence of the jaws, these are characteristics or the traits. The traits, he talked about the characters, but for this in here, you can use characters. The presence of the jaws, absence in the lampsary, and presence in other in-group taxa helps to identify the earliest branch in the vertebrate cladogram. So you're gonna have to find the characters that you will use to identify certain features of certain certain groups of particular species. So the analyzing of taxonomic distribution have to obviously come from the fact that of all analyzing of the taxonomic distribution of homologies, it enables us to identify the sequence in which the derived characteristics evolve during vertebrate phylogeny. A cladogram presents in the chronological sequence of branching during the evolutionary history of organism. However, this chronology is does anybody know what chronology is? Wahid, anybody know what chronology is? Okay, let me ask this. Is there anybody who does not know what chronology is? Show by thumb. You do not know, you know. Okay, but let me not scare you, or chronology is just a sequence, just a sequence. Like you find people say chronological order. So it will mean we are from one, then two, then three, then four. If we add, if it's sorting, whatever, it none doesn't necessarily mean whatever that you can, whatever that you can sequence, the sequence, that whatever you can sequence you may want to make for yourself. It can be either A, B, or whatever, as long as it's from, there's a sequence which is showing that it's a chronological order. So chronological order will be from Genesis. What? Okay, I'm making a better example because I'm gonna expose myself that I don't. So it will be from Genesis. Then it's gonna be from Genesis. What comes after Genesis? Jesus, it's gonna be Genesis. Okay, stop. Let's come back to biology. It's gonna be from A, B, or C, or either one, two, or Roman figure one, Roman figure two, Roman figure three. So also the chronological sequence of branching, you're gonna be moving from a certain sequence of branching during the evolutionary history. But this chronology does not indicate the time of origin of the species that we are comparing, and only the group they usually include the group which they belong to. For example, a particular species in all group may have evolved recently than a certain species that belongs to a new group. So it does. That's what they were trying to explain there. That you might find that there is a certain species which come from, which is but it's not included in terms of a time frame. That's what they're saying. That this chronology that is there on the cladogram is comparing not only the groups which they belong to, not the time that they might have evolved from. So a particular species in an old group may have evolved more recently than the species that belongs to a newer group. A cladogram is not a phylogenetic tree. So we will also go, there's an exercise which we'll have to differentiate between a cladogram and a phylogenetic tree and see how we're gonna go to that. Any question before we go to the activities? No question. All right. So how does the system of binomial nomenclature minimize ambiguity in the naming and identification of species? Anyone want to go? Okay, you know what? Let's jump A, right? Let's go for B. A B is it qualify more as an icebreaker. Are the following scientific names correct? Give reasons. So right there, this question, although I did not include the marks there, I don't know if in your tutorial thing they indicated the marks or not, or in your notes they indicated the marks. But this one also here, it's, I would say, I agree, it's 1, 2, 3, 4. I would say it's already 8 marks. So your examiner will expect you to, because he said, are the following scientific name correct? Comma, yes or no, true or false. But let's say yes or no. If it's yes, it's 1 mark. If it's no, it's 1 mark. And also give give a reason. It's a mark for the reason. So already you need to look out for that when you look out for the question, or when you analyze the question. Then think before you ink. Then you will have to see, or oh, this is a 2-part question. It's not just only one. So you might find that by whatever reason, somebody might easily forget to put and give a reason. So let's go. 1, is it the scientific name correct? Latoya?
Yes.
And the reason?
It is correct because the genus name is underlined and but no, the genus name is capitalized and the whole name is underlined.
Perfect. Yeah. The second one, anybody else? Is it correct? Anyone else beside Latoya? Vanessa? KG? Okay, Latoya? Is your hand still up? Yeah.
It's not correct.
Why?
The first part is capitalized, but the second part is not italicized, and the whole name is not even underlined.
Yeah. And if they don't want to underline it, well, what could they should italize it, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so yes, the first letter is in capital letter, but the person did not underline it. If you didn't want to underline it, he was supposed to put it in italics. And the third one,
The third one is actually correct.
is actually correct. And the fourth one,
It's not because Homo sapiens they did not put the N. It actually was not written fully correct.
yeah. So the spelling it's wrong. Wrong spelling. So I used to, when I was still a student, even now I'm terrible. I'm sure you might be going through seeing it sometimes where I'm still, but when you are writing, you're gonna spend a lot of time with what you call formatting. Formatting is to make sure that your work is good. And one of the things that you the thing which is so painful to lose marks from is when you lose marks from a spelling error. It hurts. It hurts because you know the answer. But imagine I'm losing a mark just because I could not put the. So it's one of the things we call it a formatting error in scientific writing, that you need to pay attention after you are done with your writing. You actually need to maybe give Prim so that she could proofread, because she speak good English, and she could hopefully she will charge you free or charge when she could proofread. Sometimes you do what you call proofread when you are doing scientific writing. I get it. There's also, with last week we talked about plagiarism, that you don't need to copy somebody else's work. After that, you also have to, in a mini dissertation, but maybe not in honors really, you need to go and give somebody to proofread so that you make sure that you don't lose a lot of marks or get a lot of comments, harsh comments with wrong spellings, because we know most of us, English is not our mother tongue. It's our first language, what do you call it, first additional language, and all that. So the first one is wrong simply because of wrong spelling. So imagine you are losing that 1 mark. And anyone who want to tackle A, how does the system of binomial nomenclature minimize the ambiguity in naming and identification species? We talk about this at first. And the reason why I want you to answer this is I don't want you to just abstract or tabulate the one in the memorandum only. I just, because also this you can tabulate it in your own language. Prim, I see the hand.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Nelufule. Just an announcement to students that we do have tutorials done by a master's in English as well as a professor in English. that assists our students with reading and writing skills. The explanations of plagiarism, how to copy anything. So I will send out those invitations as soon as those classes start, and I think it will help a lot because not only in your bachelor's, but right up through to your doctorate, these people assist you with reading and writing skills. All right, so that will be an advantage, and I'll send that invitations out soon.
Yeah. And there are two things that I always tell that my younger. So my younger brother is just he just enrolled in vets that he's doing. What is he doing? Some computer science, yada stuff. But I always tell people that. So when I was helping him register, there are two things that are obviously his biology is not major because he's doing something completely different. But I always tell people, even us who are doing biology, that for elective, also do statistics. Number two, English, because these are two things that you won't run away from. Because when you're doing your master's and your doctorate further, you find that there are people who knows their stuff. They are good. You can go to the field and be able to collect the data. In BLG 1501, we talked about collecting data. If you're doing an experiment, you will see even when you're doing second year and collecting, you call collecting data and analysis, but you need to present that in a form of a report. And you will find that you are struggling with the output of language, and you find that you can do a research in a year, and you find that the contents or the data and analysis, you do them in just less than 2 months and you're done. But you spend the rest of the 8 months writing one every 2 weeks. You are sending it to your mentor or your supervisor, you're returning it because the writing skill is not there and all that. So yeah, you might think of utilizing very that opportunity by both grabbing it by both hands if you can. So anybody want to go at question A? How does the system of binomial nomenclature minimize the ambiguity in the naming and identification of species? Anyone? Okay. If no one want to go, let's go to the answers. So the answers that yes, the system of nomenclature avoids the ambiguity in the naming of species. Why? Because it assign a unique two-part name to each species. So it's simple like what is going on in the country. So when you're born, you have to be documented. But because yeah, we have the thing that makes us unique is our ID number, perhaps because there are people you will find that there are many common names like Watavo, like there are many common names, Tavo or Sizwe or Mpo, or what's the most common surname, Mokwena or Zwane. And see, even in football, those who the gents who watch football, you will know that there's somebody who's called Thabo Mokoena, this common name. But what the unique part about that particular person is it's an ID. But here, when we're talking about the species, the unique is that each name is to each species. That is unique. So you don't wanna have two different species which are from different genus which has the same name. So this system, it helps, it makes that particular species will be unique and will be able to characterize it and distinguish it from other species in simple terms. So it will help because it assign unique two-part name to each species. These names here, they are assigned only so there is acacia ariloba. Obviously, there are different in the population of this acacia ariloba. There are many of them, but they are simply unique. There's also Panthera. You don't. It's this Panthera pardus. It's unique to itself only. And the reasoning, the answers to those questions is yes. The scientific name is written correctly, and the first letter of the genus is written with in capital letter, whilst both the genus specific epithets are underlined. The second one, what is the second one? The second one is no. Why? The name has been spelled well. Yeah, both the genus and specific epithet should either be underlined or italicized. You see the form of reasoning that they give. Yes, I acknowledge that the spelling is correct, but the genus is not underlined or italicized. The third one, Opisthatus ventralis, is yes, all the rules have been followed. That's a good sign. No, wrong spelling we mentioned. In addition, correct way is Homo sapiens. Any questions with regard to the outline of the answers? Let's go to activity number 2. Then how does the taxonomic hierarchy help biologists organize information about different species? Number 2, list major taxonomic categories from most to least. Let's also again start with B. Our B will be our icebreaker. Again, I think this is the easiest one. Let's go. List the major taxonomic categories from most to least, inclusive. Anyone? Vanessa? AG? Kahiso? Latoya? Yes. Tandaza Latoya?
It starts with the kingdom, the phylum, class, order, family, genus, and species.
Yes. So, and also, you know what kind of question they may bring? They may, I saw in one of your past question papers, if not one of your exercises, they may also bring them. They may also bring them in. They may also bring them like kingdom. They say arrange them in a proper order in the taxonomic categories from most to least. They may say arrange them. So you are correct on that one. And let's go back to A. How does the taxonomic hierarchy help biologists organize information about different species? Okay, so you are right on the B. It's kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, and species. And while we are still here, you need to note that I've mentioned that we actually, there might be a moment in exception. I will give this example next time about species where they fall under subspecies, where there's a species which also has a subspecies of that species, and a family and a genus which also have a subgenus of that genus and subfamily of that family. So, and also there are others which I don't know. Hopefully, we won't go through those. There are others which they were they were they were they were not, because this is a big big classification of species where there were no consensus. If like you found similar species or related species, which is confusing, and some scientists or biologists categorize it as subfamily or subgenuses because they didn't want to call that species a species. They were like, nah, it's called subgenus. But we'll go to that in the probably next week when we go through the example of certain species and when we go through some exercises. Then Also, there's the answer to how does the taxonomic hierarchy help biologists organize information about different species? Is that the taxonomic hierarchy help the biologists organize information about different species? Why? Because it categorizes them into increasingly groups, species that that are included in a lower taxonomic category, which share many characteristics, whereas those included in the same higher category share fewer characteristics. So here is where you're gonna have to talk about shared primitive and shared derived characteristics. That this is just an information. It helps because there's a differentiations of characteristics which are characterized by those which are included not only in the same higher category, and also those ones which are included not only in fewer characteristics, but is the combination which helps because there is a differentiation of characteristics in those hierarchy or in those primitive differentiated or traits and all that. Any question up to so far? Okay, let me just go through this. I'll just go through the principles of maximum parsimony and maximum likelihood systems in a systematic or reconstruct phylogenetic tree, and therefore we will end it for today. I don't want to start a much bigger topic that we won't finish. So just bear with me. We're just gonna do this topic and then we'll be done for the day. Yes. So the question is also there. It's also you're not there in the when we start. It shows that I show you that this information you can find it in Campbell. Let me say. Let me mention the chapter. Where is the chapter? Chapter 22. To complete this session, you will need to use the learning unit, but we'll share the PDF. The PDF will indicate so don't worry about that. But it's a recap of chapter 22. And what I like about your lecture, when he was comprising these notes, he also indicated the pages which you can be able to extract this specific notes where he needs you to focus specifically on. And I will really appreciate it more if you also use your lecturer's guideline as to where they're saying you should get their learning materials from, because if they specifically even refer to pages, you will not go wrong onto that. But yes, to answer your question, Mr. Kahisa, hope I've answered your question. So to convert it, the phylogenetic tree to because the said cladogram is not a phylogenetic tree, so to convert it into phylogenetic tree, you will need an information from a source such as the fossil record. Remember when we talked about the fact that you find that this in the cladogram they are not differentiated with time when we're talking about chronological order. When I was asking you what is a chronological order or the chronological sequence, that this branching during the evolution registered, but that this chronology does not indicate the time of the origin of the species that that you will be comparing, or that we are comparing, only the groups to which it only compare the groups that it belongs to. So in order to convert this to phylogenetic tree, you will have to have information such as fossil record. Fossil record, it includes time. You can be able to deduce the record of time, which indicate when and in which group the characteristic first appeared, any characters that has first appears. So any chronology represented by the branching pattern of a phylogenetic tree is relative or relative. When they're relative, they're just comparing the timeline. So earlier versus later, when in terms of the time frames rather than absolute. So perhaps they could say so many millions years ago. So this just gives you the sense of the time frame which could be there. So which means that you will have to compare it in terms of it's either early or is it very later in the later stages. Therefore, some kind of tree diagram can be used to provide more specific information about the timing. So in a phylogram, the length of a branch reflects the number of genetic changes that that may have taken place in a particular DNA or RNA sequence in a lineage. So even though those branches in a phylogram may have different lengths or in all the different lineages from that common ancestor that have survived in those times. But events such as human and bacteria can have a common ancestor that lived more than 3 billion years ago. And like what they said here, that it can be either earlier or later. So the alternative, whether it has been 4 million or 3 billion years ago, it could be visible or not. So this ancestor could be, for example, was a single cell prokaryotic, which was more modern, and bacteria to that. So I think let me end here today. I don't want to do the just I want to create this. I'll put you in the PowerPoint where I'll have to list the events which could be happening, and then we will take it from there next week. But we will share this notes if you do not have the notes with you, the notes for B. But you know what I will do? I will share these notes when I am done with this sequence of the phylogeny and systematic unit 1. If the absence of any question, I think we're gonna end here today.